Okay, good morning everyone. Welcome to the Sustainable Business Network webinar. Sorry to get you all up so early, all you early risers, your home teachers, Sustainable Business Network members, and all of those that also noticed from the booking that are new to the Sustainable Business Network. My name's Richard Hall. I'm not actually hosting today. My colleague Joe Watson is doing all the clever technical stuff. I'm the Business Development Manager at Greentech South, and for the last 6 years it's been my great joy to help organise Sustainable Business Network events, which have always been run as live events. So today is a first for us. We've always talked about doing webinars, and the reason that we've not done them before is because I've been too frightened of the technology, and because also the events themselves are great networking events and the start of many long-term business relationships. Anyway, they do say that necessity is the mother of invention, so here we go with our first one. As it's our first one, and we're all sitting in different lounges, bedrooms, studies, kitchens, whatever, please bear with us and follow some simple rules. Please keep your microphone muted, otherwise the audio will get really, really annoying feedback. We're not putting video on because that tends to give us connectivity issues, because we don't all have super broadband. We were happy to take any question that you may have, so please use the chat box, which you should see somewhere on there. If you can't find it, ping an email to joe.watson@port.ac.uk, and we will make sure that if we don't answer those questions today, we'll make sure that we answer them. We'll find somebody that knows the answer. After this morning's event, which we should be finishing at about 9:15, 9:20ish, we'll send you a link to a feedback form and all of this morning's presentations, and also to some other information that you request. Before I start, a few thank yous. First one is to Test Valley Borough Council, who sponsored this event. We should all now be sitting in the Lights Theatre in Andover with lashings of bacon sandwiches, coffee, etc., but unfortunately events have overtaken us. Test Valley Borough Council contacted us shortly after they declared a climate emergency, and they asked us, the Sustainable Business Network, to find a way to engage with SMEs to help them move towards net zero. The pandemic has then obviously taken hold, and so we've had to trim the speaking slots, and we lose all the great networking connectivity that we usually have. However, we will share Test Valley's climate emergency plans, which might give you some ideas for your own businesses after this webinar. Thanks also to our speakers who've been working remotely and coming up with some, I hope, presentations that will be of value to you. Finally, thanks to you for joining us today and getting up so early on a Friday morning. I personally will be missing Joe Wicks at 9 o'clock, but I can catch up with him later for my pain. So a little bit about, for those who are new to the Sustainable Business Network, about what we are. We were set up nearly 25 years ago. We have two aims, or main aims, is to inform business through 8 live workshops a year and a couple of visits of the carrot and stick of sustainability. The stick being the law, the environmental regulations that businesses all have to follow, and Pete Schofield of GEP will be talking about those in a minute. And then the most importantly is the carrot, the enhanced reputation that businesses can get from having a good, sustainable strategy. Engage staff in their activities, preparations for responding to tenders, networking opportunities that we bring so that businesses can collaborate. But most importantly of all, we're not just here about saving trees, etc. It's also about lowering costs, energy use, saving money, etc. We've got 2 teams. You can see them there. You've got on the left-hand side of your screen, you can see Wendy Buckley, who leads the North Hampshire Sustainable Business Network. Wendy on the left of your screen is with Carbon Footprint, based in Basingstoke. And on the right, slightly less well attired, is Duncan East on the left. who is in charge of sustainability and everything to do with the environment at Marwell Zoo. That wasn't a typical event, that was a visit. So in the team on North Hampshire, we've got Carbon Footprint, who chair, Farnborough Airport, CAG, Portals Paper, previously De La Rue, Basingstoke Borough Council, and Rushmore and Hart. These events all take place because of the generosity of local authorities who put money into a pot to make sure that we can actually run these. In Central Hampshire, we've got Marwell Zoo who run this, along with valuable input from Winchester University, GEP Environmental, who you're going to hear from in a couple of minutes, Winchester City Council, who are huge supporters, and Winchester Bid, Test Valley Borough Council, who've recently joined us, and also Ridge Construction. So we run the 8 workshops, and we also do visits as well because it's nice to get out and see. So on the left, you can see Hampshire's, I think it's the only wind farm in Hampshire, set at a nursery just to the west of Winchester. And on the right, not quite such a glamorous visit, which was to the material recovery facility in Eastleigh, which was very interesting to see what goes on there. And congratulations to everybody that works in those conditions, I have to say. The workshops that we run cover everything. We've had workshops on electric vehicles, we've had Tesla vehicles driving around Farnborough Airport, corporate social responsibility, tracking your carbon footprint, energy management, renewables, how to install them and the best way to do it and where to get them from, green working spaces, sustainability grants, and lots more. And we'll be talking about some of those grants today. The Sustainable Business Network is managed by our team at Greentech South. We're based at the University of Portsmouth. Here are our latest recruits. On the left, you've got Matt Pollinger, who'll be talking, last speaker. Alice, who looks after our social media. So if you do want to tweet anything out about your what you're doing on sustainability, just pop an email to Joe Watson and we'll make sure that goes out, so it'll be good publicity for you. And on the right is Joe, who is the tech guru for today. So Greentech South, what do we do? Quick shout out for us. Network of 300 members. We are an innovation and technology cluster helping businesses develop low carbon solutions. So we will give access to research facilities, academic expertise. We run lots of events. We've got 2 lots of funding at the moment, which Matt will be talking about shortly. We run pitching events to big corporates and to local authorities. We will review your bids if you're bidding for grants. We can't write them because that takes up too much time, but we've done a lot of bid reviews lately, especially for Innovate UK and other funds, and we have our own funds. And we're part of a UK-wide network called Fingers UK, who've got hubs in the northwest and along the coast in Brighton, and that network is growing every year. So, quick statement from Councillor David Drew of Test Valley Borough Council, who are sponsoring today's event. I'll quickly read it to you. These will be on your slides, which you'll get later on. I'm delighted to be able to contribute by way of a few words of introduction to this webinar. Circumstances are such that while we are unable to get together in the more convivial surroundings of the Light Theatre with our bacon rolls, businesses must continue as best they can and most importantly plan for the future. Building businesses to be fit for the ever-greening future is vital, and with that in mind, I'm personally a great fan of innovation, particularly in engineering, and was delighted the Test Valley Business Award joint winner for Best New Business went to an engineering firm working for a Formula One manufacturer, and who I think is contributing to our national ventilator production effort, as are other Andover businesses who are also doing vital work for our NHS. Over the next hour or so, I hope you'll all gain a better knowledge of the grant funding that is coming online, that you will take away the knowledge of how to access that funding. Finally, I wish you all every success, and do please keep in touch so we can get together next time and meet face to face. And hopefully that's not going to be too long in the future. We will be repeating this event in Andover as soon as we're able to. Those are our sponsors: Winchester City Council, Basingstoke and Dean, Test Valley, Hart District Council and Rushmore. Without their funding and their support, none of these would take place. They're free to join, free to attend, free to network. Everything about them is to support business. I'm now going to hand over to Pete Schofield of GEP Environmental. Pete always kicks off our central SBN events in Hampshire by talking about why we have to comply with law, some of the fines that come along, and it's an important part. In the north of Hampshire, Wendy Buckley of Carbon Footprint runs that session. So, over to you, Pete.
Get the presentation going. Okay, hopefully everyone can see that. Perhaps Joe or Richard, you could just let me know that that's up on the screen.
Up on the screen?
Yep. Okay, excellent. Okay, good morning, everybody. Thanks very much for joining us this morning. As Richard says there, so I normally provide this update every time we do this Central Hampshire SBN events. So my name is Pete Schofield. I'm the Director and Principal Environmental Consultant at GEP Environmental. We're based in Winchester. And basically, we just provide environmental consultancy services across the UK with sort of key offices in Winchester and Edinburgh. So day to day, we are all involved as consultants with environmental legislation. So what I try to do in this sort of session is just to really give an overview of some of the key things that have happened that are coming out, look at some of the forthcoming legislation, and really just give some practical top tips on things that you can do to comply, things you should be aware of as businesses, and hopefully not to try and make this too dry, because legislation can get a little bit dry. So we'll go through the policy and legal updates. We'll have a look at a couple of fines, have a look at what's on the horizon, and then for this session in particular, we're just going to conclude with a little bit on energy efficiency audits. In particular, just outlining some of the legislation that applies to buildings that you'll probably be aware of, but provides really good context for why an energy efficiency audit would be beneficial to help with those compliance obligations, but also in the wider picture of things like net zero carbon to help reduce your carbon emissions to achieve financial savings, which will then lead into the next presentation on where you can actually get hold of one of these audits. To start with some of the policy and legislation updates, the first thing I would say is that since the last presentation we delivered in January, there haven't been a huge amount of updates since. We tend to find this anyway towards the end of a sort of financial year. Generally, government and policymakers are focused elsewhere, but obviously with the current situation, things that have been brought before Parliament for review and consideration have actually been withdrawn in the light of recent events. Not just in terms of the current coronavirus pandemic, but also in terms of Brexit, which had quite a severe impact on the rate and type of legislation that's being brought before Parliament. So the first thing, just to kind of recap, is actually the Environment Bill, which was originally laid before Parliament in November 2019. But due to Brexit and the sort of changes around that, it was actually withdrawn just before Christmas, but has now been reintroduced back into Parliament in about January, end of January, start of February this year. So the Environment Bill is set out to be a new legislative framework to tackle really core environmental issues in response to the climate emergencies that have been declared across the UK. So the bill is meant to be a governance framework, so it's going to set out a number of different priority areas and to actually set out legally binding targets within those. So the four key areas to the UK Environment Bill are air quality, water quality, biodiversity and green spaces, and resource and waste efficiency. So these really are the key environmental issues that are facing the UK. Air quality is of significant impact across the UK. Huge number of low emission zones and ultra low emission zones being introduced into cities across the UK. Air quality, interestingly, is actually one of the areas that's starting to improve in a way as a result of the coronavirus pandemic, with all of us doing what we're doing just this morning, working from home, not getting into our cars, not utilising public transport. So actually this pandemic is going to have a positive output for the environment from that. But it still remains a really significant issue for the UK to set on a national level. So importantly as well, Richard earlier mentioned about sort of carrot and stick. In terms of the stick aspect of this, this is also going to introduce the Office for Environmental Protection. So this is to make sure that there is continued and sustained progress in monitoring environmental issues, and in particular to ensure public authorities comply with climate and environmental laws. Local authorities have a significant role to play in terms of engaging with businesses, with residents in their boroughs, to work with them, as demonstrated really here by Tess Valley, looking to outreach to SME businesses, which is really good. So this Office for Environmental Protection will come forward with a range of compliance focuses to make sure that there is good progress and the bill is being worked to. So as I mentioned, there are those four key areas: air quality, water quality, biodiversity, and green spaces, resource and waste efficiency. So just to give some examples of the type of bills that are going to come through for each of these areas, air quality will probably have a strong focus on local air quality management frameworks. So there are already a number of low emission zones and ultra low emission zones cropping up across the UK, and this will really give greater structure and greater powers to local authorities where there are particular issues with air quality to implement legislative frameworks to actually control the type of traffic, volume of traffic, quality of vehicles that are going into those areas. Water quality is one of the more longer-term environmental issues, and quite often overlooked at the moment, where we've got a lot of focus on climate, resource, typically energy, and waste efficiency. So water quality is a significant issue for the UK, and so this will outline some really significant longer-term resource management processes. Biodiversity and green spaces. So there are lots of local-led nature sort of strategies and policies. So this will really be looking at key areas around development, around biodiversity net gain for developments. So i.e., when a development goes in, so sort of a housing estate or something, it's not reducing the amount of biodiversity, there is actually a net gain overall for that development. So that really requires people like house builders to think differently about how they manage these large infrastructure developments to have that biodiversity net gain aspect. Resource and waste efficiency. So typically this will come through stronger guidance and regulation around producer responsibilities. So those making products such as plastics, there will be a significant amount more responsibilities associated with them. Typically, these are regulated through a sort of financial taxation scheme. So there'll be a lot more focus on specific plastic initiatives. And I've got a couple of others coming up throughout the rest of this presentation, just to give some examples of things that are happening now. Okay, slightly different one as well. So the countryside stewardship regulations came in. So this currently replaces a pre-existing scheme, the Environmental Stewardship Grant. But basically this scheme is a grant scheme that's about providing funding to farmers, woodland owners, foresters and land managers to make environmental improvements. So as you can sort of see from the list there, there's quite a few different areas that this could be an improvement in terms of habitat and conservation. So supporting those green spaces and biodiversity programs. Managing flood risk, which actually for the UK is still quite a significant issue. And there needs to be a range of measures, both hard and soft in terms of sort of flood prevention measures. So this will be around kind of looking at natural flood risk management. So rather than sort of concrete flood barriers, this will be looking at sort of environmental flood barriers. Creation and management of woodland as well, reducing water pollution from agriculture, which actually the UK is quite good at in terms of the minimal impacts from agriculture, and importantly, encouraging educational access through hosting school visits. So getting a sense of responsibility into younger generations to look after the countryside, to have a sense of stewardship, environmental stewardship, but also, this is really about taking forward the UK's 25-year environment plan, looking to improve the environment over the next 25 years. And really that starts with getting younger generations more engaged with the environment, particularly those that are predominantly city-based, so that they can develop a sense of responsibility and within their sort of lives over the next 25 years, really contribute towards working towards net zero carbon, climate emergencies, environmental management, environmental improvement. So it's just a slightly different one to what we'd normally have in this, but I think it's quite important because it's got that real focus around the longevity. Yeah. Okay, so this piece of legislation is at the moment draft. We're expecting this to be brought in towards the end of April, but obviously that is the caveat to that is the current sort of pandemic has obviously sort of closed a lot of the legislative approval framework, so this may take slightly longer to come in than originally planned. This is the Environmental Protection Regulations 2020 for plastic straws, cotton buds and stirrers. So the purpose of this is to restrict the supply of these plastics in order to prevent pollution of the environment or harm to the health of humans and animals. So really this obviously follows the significant wave of activity following Blue Planet 2, the David Attenborough series, which really highlighted the detrimental impact of single-use plastics in the environment. With some pretty stunning videography around the impacts on wildlife and humans. So since then, there has been a real tidal wave of plastics-based legislation to really change the way that consumers are able to interact with plastics, in particular single-use. So this will prohibit the supply of single-use plastics to an end user. The exceptions to that are those straws provided by registered pharmacies, so for medicinal purposes, by catering establishments together with food or drink for immediate consumption, so that will still be permitted, and straws which are for medical purposes. Obviously, they'll be sort of single use. So also the supply of drink products with single-use plastic straws attached to their packaging. So that will be from the 3rd of July 2021. So your kids' drinks and things like that have got a single-use plastic straw attached to them, that will be prohibited. In addition, there will also be the prohibition of the supply of single-use plastic-stemmed cotton buds to an end user. So the exceptions to that will be medical, forensic, or scientific purposes, where obviously it would need to be a single-use disposable plastic. But it will also prohibit the supply of plastic drink stirrers, which, as we probably all are aware of now, sort of switching over to a sort of wood-based stirring utensil now. So this originally was due to come into force by the 30th of April 2020. As I say, slight caveat there, I think, around this, so we may expect this to come in slightly later. But in order to really give very specific guidance on how this would be applied, BEIS will be publishing some guidance about 3 weeks before this legislation comes into force to really clarify all of the different scenarios and options where it will be prohibited versus accepted to have a single-use plastic for cotton bud or stirrer. Okay, so this isn't a new piece of legislation, but this is quite important to highlight at this particular date, just because for streamlined energy and carbon reporting, it applies to from the 1st of April for the first sort of full financial year after that. So for most organisations, that will have been as of a couple of days ago. So they'll have completed their first year of data that this scheme will be applicable to. So firstly, it applies to all UK registered quoted companies, so those that are listed on the UK Stock Exchange, and applies to large unquoted companies. So they've got to meet 2 of the following criteria: either have more than 250 employees, balance sheet of 18 million, or turnover of 36 million. So just need to meet 2 of those 3. So if an organisation is caught by this piece of legislation, then they need to disclose an energy and carbon report. So that would need to cover their Scope 1 and Scope 2 greenhouse gas emissions. So typically that would include their purchased electricity, their any natural gas that they consume, and also the fuel that they directly purchase for transport. So for example, in a fleet that they own and operate, or via fuel cards, that would be within the scope of this piece of legislation. So for all of those elements, they need to publish their annual energy consumption, and they also need to provide a narrative over the energy efficiency measures they've taken in the last year. So this is quite it's obviously a new piece of legislation. There hasn't been much people reporting to this just yet, because it does apply to the first full year after 1st of April 2019. So as I say, that's only really just now completed in the last few days. So really, just to give some sort of top tips, if your organisation does have to report under the Streamlined Energy and Carbon Reporting, First thing is start collecting the data. Ideally, you'd have been carrying that out through the last 12 months anyway, but particularly things like your electricity data and gas data. Start to calculate the greenhouse gas emissions from that activity data, so converting your electricity consumption into greenhouse gas emissions. Prepare the actual SECR report. There is guidance that has got some very clear and prescriptive outline of what that looks like, which I'll show on the next slide. Engage early with the company secretary to secure placement in the annual report. As anyone who's involved in preparing a financial report knows, there is a lot of placement complexities around the report, and it's quite difficult to get space. So do engage early to make sure that the company secretary is aware this piece of legislation exists and this report needs to be published. And equally, it's optional to do so, but recommended that you seek external verification of your greenhouse gas emissions, i.e. just to make sure that you're confident it's accurate and reflective of your organisation. So there is guidance to help with this. So this is published on BEIS on gov.uk. It's called the Environmental Reporting Guidelines, including Streamlined Energy and Carbon Reporting Requirements. So have a look at that if you've got any questions, and certainly if you want to get in touch with me, I can give you any more guidance on that in particular. Okay, so really that kind of concludes the legislation that's currently out and of sort of particular importance. So we'll just go through a couple of fines just to kind of see that there is the stick element of legislation being enforced. The first thing to sort of highlight in this section is that the Joint Unit for Waste Crime has now been put together. So the purpose of this new unit is to tackle organised and serious waste crime. So that would include things around dumping hazardous materials, false labelling of waste, which can be extremely dangerous, and also financial fraud. So previously, environmental legislation is typically regulated through the Environment Agency. So this brings together not just the Environment Agency, but also HMRC, so really getting those financial fraud aspects, the National Crime Agency, which brings in the organised and serious waste crime aspect, and other enforcement agencies as well. So this is quite important actually, because in 2018, waste crime cost the UK economy £600 million. So this new unit is going to be pushing for heavier fines and prison sentences. And just to give some idea of kind of proportionality in terms of that 600 million cost to the UK, last year the Environment Agency stopped illegal activities at 912 sites and applied £2.8 million worth of fines. So there is a bit of a disparity in that in terms of sort of the impact versus the consequences there. So this joint unit has now really been set up to deal with these bigger problems and really sort of look at cross-collaboration across these enforcement agencies. So hopefully from that, what we should say is that actually people are being fined and prosecuted more and more seriously for these more organised and serious crimes. So just an example of one of those. So this is a waste crime that's committed at Herne Hill. So this was a farm whereby the owners didn't have an environmental permit for any waste processing or waste storage or disposal on this site, and approximately 53,000 tonnes of soil and builders waste, which can include some pretty nasty stuff, to be fair, was dumped at this site. That's the equivalent to about 135 lorry loads. So this was a family-owned site, so there is currently an arrest warrant for the actual owner of the site, so they did fail to turn up to court for sentencing. The main person that had organised it received a 30-week custodial sentence, and someone else that sort of facilitated it, I believe it's the sister to the first person, has got a 6-week custodial sentence suspended for 2 years. So all three of these individuals were convicted for breaching the Environmental Permitting England and Wales Regulations 2010. The permitting regulations 2010 cover a real wide range of legislation, not just relating to waste, but also to air quality, to water, and to sort of general pollution as well. So quite a lot of the prosecutions that come for waste are levied against the permitting regulations. So it's quite an encompassing piece. It's been a bit for quite a time for fines because that's all we've got for the moment. But what's on the horizon? So these are consultations that are coming out shortly, that will be looking to kind of scope out new legislation that will be coming in later in the year or years. So the first one, again, I mentioned there's a couple on plastic packaging. So this is the plastic packaging tax, the actual design of the policy. So this is a consultation that's being run at the moment, looking to be introduced from April 2022, where the plastic packaging tax was announced in Budget 2020. So the aim of this piece of legislation would be to encourage the use of recycled plastic instead of new plastic. So the idea of this is this creates a bit of a circular economy principle by legislating that recycled plastic is a positive alternative to new plastic, i.e. wouldn't be taxed, creates greater demand for recycled plastic, and in turn this should then create increased levels of recycling and collection of that plastic waste, which ultimately means it doesn't go to landfill and doesn't get incinerated. So government's outlined that the plastic packaging tax will be £200 per tonne, where less than 20% recycled plastic is used in packaging. So this should really create that kind of circular economy principle of taxing people that continue to use new plastics, and I imagine that tax would go up over time and really start to shift people towards the use of recycled plastic, which will drive greater recycling and greater environmental improvement. So the second one is a consultation on introducing E10 Petrol. So I've got the logos there just to kind of remind us, obviously, that the fuel types, petrol, diesel, are currently E5, and it has the circle emblem, and B7 is diesel, which has the square emblem. So currently, unleaded petrol contains up to 5% bioethanol. So the Department for Transport is now consulting on introducing a new blend, which will have up to 10% bioethanol. So the purpose of this is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So basically, the higher percentage of bioethanol, the lower the greenhouse gas emissions. So it's important because in 2018, transport accounted for 28% of the total UK greenhouse gas emissions. Introducing E10 could reduce annual emissions by 750,000 tonnes, equivalent to taking 350,000 cars off the road. So that's a really significant reduction in CO2. Really important to highlight, though, that in terms of the local air pollution issues, which are caused by nitrous oxide, it has a very minimal reduction in terms of that. So this won't sort of really support in terms of local air quality issues, which typically is the NOx emissions from exhaust fumes, but it will work towards the net zero carbon target by 2050 for the UK. So it's more around the carbon dioxide in this case. So the reason why this is being consulted on and not just done is that currently not all petrol vehicles are actually approved to use E10. So a lot of the older petrol vehicles may not be able to use it. And the other slight complication to this is not overly straightforward to actually determine. There isn't a distinct cars before this year can or can't use it, etc. kind of way of sort of implementing this. So it does come down to a lot of consumer knowledge. And so at the moment, there's a sort of a concern that petrol providers wouldn't make E10 available on the basis that consumers might get it wrong, and there might be liabilities and damages to vehicles and things. So it's quite a wide-ranging consultation on how this should be implemented. So this is quite an interesting one. So this is a consultation on providing non-statutory, so non-legal, so just guidance, for pensions on reporting climate-related risks in line with the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. So the TCFD is a scheme that requires you to look at the climate risks within your organisation and provide some financial quantification of what those risks equate to, and look at it and consider those risks in the same level of seriousness as you would look at other financial risks to, for example, an investment. So pension funds invest, are significant investors, in particular into things like the built environment, into buildings and infrastructure. So the idea of this is to encourage pension funds to invest in climate resilient investments. So i.e. they would actually only invest in, for example, real estate investment trusts that have got good energy efficient buildings, a good energy stock there. And the idea is then that this would help to start to shift the entire market towards building and operating better buildings. so that overall we're kind of improving our building stock, which account for a significant amount of carbon emissions across the UK. So this consultation is split into 4 key parts. It's around what guidance needs to be provided on how you actually identify climate risks and convert those into financial risks, how you would go about integrating climate risks into decision making, into the kind of governance and decision making processes within these pension funds. Technical guidance on the scenario analysis, so actually what are the relative impacts of these investments over a period of time, because obviously we've got to layer over the fact that that climate change will differ year to year and get steadily worse the closer we get to 2050. So kind of mapping out the relative impact and financial risk associated with that. And also consulting on next steps. Actually, what do you do with that information? How do you go from taking it as a sort of a risk assessment process into action? This is quite an interesting piece, and I'm sure we'll start to see a lot more of this type of legislation coming out as well. And we've also got a consultation on contracts for difference, so sort of proposed amendments to this scheme. So contracts for difference is a government mechanism to support low carbon electricity generation. So it sets obligations for energy suppliers, for the energy market to provide proportional contribution from low carbon electricity across the UK. So this consultation is really wide ranging. So I've just really summarised a couple of the key points here, which is around how it can be changed to support the net zero carbon by 2050 ambition to the UK. So it would need to increase low carbon generation. Obviously, it needs to achieve value for money, so it needs to be kind of proportionate. So it needs to give secure, affordable and clean energy for householders and businesses. It generally needs to advance the low carbon economy and needs to maintain energy security as well. So this is quite a wide-ranging consultation. It won't affect businesses directly day to day, but it will affect the total UK grid and how green the grid is, which will come down through into your own businesses if you're calculating your carbon footprint, using sort of grid average emissions factors. So I think that really kind of concludes then what's on the horizon. So really just a couple of slides just to summarise why an energy efficiency audit is beneficial in supporting compliance, and how it can help to identify financial carbon savings before I hand over to Matt to kind of talk through the actual what's available through the Greentech South. So just to kind of give a bit of a summary of the compliance schemes, obviously we've got net zero carbon, so net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. So this applies to the whole of the UK, and that includes all businesses. So businesses will need to be working towards net zero as well. If you own or operate buildings, you'll also have energy performance certificates for commercial buildings, or potentially for public sector buildings, display energy certificates. So these 3 compliance schemes basically measure the impacts and energy performance of your buildings. So an energy efficiency audit, basically, in a very simple way, looks at how energy is used across a building or site or campus, and looks to identify energy saving opportunities. So these could be a range of technical aspects or behavioural aspects. So could be looking at the site management and behaviour, so how energy is utilised. So looking at how people turn things on and off, what settings there are. Could look at technology around HVAC, heating, ventilation, air conditioning, building fabric, how well is your building retaining energy, lighting, electrical equipment and industrial equipment, and low carbon and renewable technologies, things like solar PV. So the audit would help to identify energy saving opportunities, which reduces your energy consumption, your kilowatt hours. Hopefully would achieve carbon savings, so reduce your carbon impact, work towards net zero carbon, and should ultimately deliver financial savings, i.e. you're reducing something that you're paying for in terms of energy, so it should save you money as well. So if you then take that audit and take those recommendations, and if you can get the relevant funding requirements that you need to implement those technologies, then you can start to reduce your energy consumption, which may help to improve your EPC rating for your building, perhaps help you to improve your DEC rating for your public sector building, and support your overall decarbonisation programme and work towards net zero carbon. So if you're sort of thinking, really, where can I get one? The answer is here. I won't give too much away because obviously that's in terms of the next presentation. We'll just give a bit of an outline of the funding that's available via Greentech South, and GP Environmental is pleased to be the delivery partner for the energy efficiency audit programme. So I will finish there and hand over to the next speaker.
Hi Pete, thank you for the presentation. We've just got a couple of questions. That's okay?
Yes, yeah, of course, yeah.
Right, so first one we've got is how far can you go with the energy efficiency audits you do?
Okay, how far? In terms of geographic, or are we sort of thinking in terms of sort of technology coverage, etc.?
Distance, like geographic.
Okay, so yeah, across the south, I think Richard and Matt were able to give sort of a bit more definition around that. But in terms of certainly across the south is where we're kind of focusing it. But I believe UK wide is probably a real scope for that.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and just one more question. With your energy efficiency audits, do you give advice on electric vehicles?
I'm sorry, Joe, you broke up a little bit there. Was the last bit electric vehicles?
It was, yeah, electric vehicles.
Can do, yes. So typically this is focused on, how the building uses energy, but obviously electric vehicles, in terms of the charging infrastructure, would impact on the, the way the building is designed and draws energy. So yes, at a high level, we would be giving advice on sort of potentially around the charging infrastructure. But in terms of the vehicles, there's quite a lot of specialists out there for vehicles. This is mostly focused on the buildings.
Thank you, that's great. And I think my colleague Richard Paul actually had a question as well, so I'm just going to unmute him for that. Richard, you're unmuted now.
Hi Pete, Richard here. One of our clients, KCC, make compostable food trays for oven-ready meals. And also for the huge growth in delivery companies delivering meals to homes like Deliveroo and people like that. They're making these compostable food trays completely free of plastic, and yet that legislation that you talked about seems to be that you've actually got to have recycled plastic in there to avoid a fine. Is that correct, or am I misreading it?
No, I think that's the sort of scenario that would be clarified within the guidance document, because that would be completely sort of undermining the purpose of the legislation, which is looking at alternatives. So I'm confident that would be clarified within the guidance that's due to come out 3 weeks before the legislation.
Good, because it doesn't make sense otherwise. All right.
Yes, no, absolutely.
Back to our host.
Yeah, sorry, Pete, we've got a couple more just come through in the chat box right now. So the question is, what are your views about a new piece of tax on plastic packaging when we already have a producer responsibility obligation for plastic?
Yeah, so producer responsibility obligations, they're quite a good piece of legislation in that it covers impacts across a variety of the supply chain. So it's not just with kind of manufacturers, but also with people that kind of use it, etc. downstream. So I think the real problem is that it's not driving enough change quick enough. The market in terms of sort of plastics is still being relatively slow to respond to the general pressure of the environmental impacts. That's not to say there isn't great work happening. So I'm working with a number of clients that are doing, really great things with plastic and looking to try and minimize it and look at really, clever alternatives. The example that Richard just cited there, being an example of that. But I think it's just really about getting momentum moving.
Then we have, do you think government targets are a bit lax? Are they not implementing important changes slowly?
Yes, that's a bit of a difficult one to say because there are such a range, and obviously what I presented here is just a snapshot. There is a lot more legislation out there that does, a lot of good. I think this is a slight bit of kind of chicken and egg, the government has got to set a general sense of direction and purpose for the organisations to work to, but it can't really sort of stifle their economic growth, because that in turn leads to their ability to innovate and to sort of look at more sustainable alternatives. So it is about kind of coaxing things along. In terms of generally the net zero carbon target for 2050, I think that's where we're going to have to see much more radical changes and significant shifts in the way that we use energy, for example, and use transport across the UK. So I would imagine that is an area that we're going to see accelerate over the next few years.
Yeah, we've got just one last question. Can you explain why catering establishments are exempt regarding plastic straws? If end users have to use plastic reusable, why don't caterers?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, to be fair. I mean, it's kind of one of those ones you go, actually, that's probably got to be predominantly where most of the where most of straws are used, sort of in those fast food catering, for example. Predominantly, this is around kind of health and safety in terms of their capacity to provide sort of reusable cups and things like that. I think that's an area that will change over time, and I suspect there'll be much more stringent guidance in terms of what actually qualifies as a valid exception under that. So I think that is more geared towards quite specific scenarios. So once that guidance is published, and perhaps in time for the next presentation, the next SBN event, we'll kind of be able to give a bit more definition to that once that guidance comes out.
Okay, thanks, Pete. If there's any more questions or if you want to come in now, I'll send it over to through email.
Yeah, easy. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, just passing it over to my colleague Matthew Pullinger now.
Yes, thank you very much, Joe, and thanks to Pete as well for that very good presentation. Just get my slides up. Here we go. So welcome everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm just going to quickly run through an overview of the Emphasise project and the funding that we have available. Joe, can you just confirm that the slides are up, please?
Yeah, we can see them.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much. Okay, so I've got a few live business case studies of current applicants for the Emphasise project, and just run through the funding that's available and how to access it. So an introduction. So the Emphasise project is a 2.6 million 3-year ERDF funded SME business support project. It's based around the South region, predominantly EM3 region, but the funding's available throughout England. And the support is offered through 4 funded support programs. These are managed jointly by the University of Portsmouth and the University of Winchester, and delivered by the Cleantech cluster Greentech South. The overall aim of the project is to reduce CO2 emissions, like I said, in the EM3 region by a minimum of 2,000 tonnes, and these will be hopefully delivered through the 4 funded support programs like I mentioned. So the 4 funded support programs, so the free energy efficiency audits with GEP Environmental, such like Pete was just talking about. So these can be accessed through Emphasise for free. And it's relatively simple. You just get in contact with the Emphasise team. I'll have contact details later. And it's because it's an ERDF project, unfortunately there's quite a bit of form filling to be completed. But once the forms are completed, they'll be forwarded over to GEP Environmental, and then the audits can be booked in, and the process will be started. Obviously, with the current situation behind COVID-19, the audits will be delayed a bit, but they are being planned to take over as soon as the current situation is resolved. So then moving past the audits, as Pete said, technologies and recommendations will be made from the audit, and then Emphasise has a funding program that will allow you to access some funds to help you implement the changes. So the funds available are 36% of the total purchase costs. up to a maximum of £25,000. I'll go into a bit more detail about what eligible costs are and again how to access that fund in a bit. And then the third funded support program through Emphasize is innovation audits. So this is moving more into the R&D and the innovation side of projects into clean growth technologies. The innovation audits are delivered through Greentech South, and we utilise the resources and the academic expertise at the University of Portsmouth and the University of Winchester. And here we will just come into your business, either myself, Richard, or other members of the team. We'll come and sit down and we'll talk about how we can deliver the support through the programme. And then this will hopefully lead on to the innovation and R&D grants, which again, similarly to the energy efficiency grants, will be 36% of the total project costs, up to that maximum of £25,000 to help find those best low CO2 solutions to help reduce the emissions in the South region, the M3 region, sorry. And then finally, there are other instances of business support that we can offer through Emphasize. Rich has already touched on that earlier. There was with the bid writing support, but there's a few other areas that we can help, which I'll cover towards the end of the presentation. So the energy efficiency audits, just to give you a rough idea of who's signing up for it so far, we've got quite a wide range of SMEs across quite a few sectors. Just run through a few here. So we've got Bowtie Construction. So they're a sustainable construction company based down in High Wycombe. They're looking for a complete audit throughout their entire business operations. We have Marbas Group Limited based in Winchester. They're a structural and civil engineering consultancy company. They've just recently bought a new office block, so they want an audit to go in and see what they can do to make sure that they're doing everything they can in there. The Elizabeth Foundation, so they're based down in Portsmouth at Queen Alexandra Hospital, and they're actually a charity supporting children with hearing difficulties. So again, they're keen to see what changes they can implement to reduce the energy and also make savings. And then finally, we can go look at Borden Innovation Centre. They offer office space and business support down over in Borden and East Hampshire. And again, they're looking to implement as many technology changes and any cost savings and energy savings that they can offer to their businesses as well. So what's eligible for the energy efficiency grants? So this is no means an exhaustive list. This is just a few items that I've picked out. This seems to be the most popular choices so far. So LED lighting, one of the most popular choices that can boast payback periods ranging from as little as 12 months, depending on the size of the premises, obviously. So going is factories, warehouses, and offices. Moving on to solar panels, again another popular choice. However, payback still seemingly quite high, but with the funding offered through Emphasize, we can offer to reduce that payback by up to the 36%, as mentioned. So these can be panels on top of offices, on top of factories, on top of warehouses, car park shelters, depending on the space, and even solar farm arrays, again, depending on the space available to the project. Moving on to insulation. So this could be cavity wall insulation, loft insulation, or something as simple as replacing those old leaky windows. Try and keep that heat in. EVs and EV charging points. So we had a question earlier about electric vehicles. Electric vehicles are an eligible cost as long as they stay within the business. So if it's carpooling or going off to engagement, moving between offices, so on and so forth. And obviously those EVs then come with the tax benefits, such as no fuel or duty tax. And then we've got the EV charging points. So again, depending on the size of the space available or the limitations on funding, you could link this into pre-existing renewable energy sources such as the solar panel, car park shelters, linking into your charging points. And then the other renewable sources of energy such as ground source heat pumps, wind, hydro, biomass, all eligible costs to reduce the energy usage. and then finally moving on to other technologies such as voltage optimization, which is a systematic controlled reduction in energy use and overall power demand, which again, similarly to LED lighting, can boast quite low paybacks and relatively high savings in CO2. So I've just got a few case studies of businesses that have either gone through the program or are looking to go through the program. We'll start with Morgan Furniture. So Morgan Furniture are in the process of installing £20,000 worth of LED lighting. That's against their offices, their factory and their warehouse. Through the Emphasise program, they're looking at a grant payback after everything's installed of around £7,200. So this is, like I said, this has reduced their payback period of the LED lighting to just 14 months and proposed savings of 60 tonnes of CO2 emissions. So our next energy efficiency grant case study is Medisort. These are a medical waste disposal and collection company based down in Brighton. And so they have recently just proposed 2 energy efficiency grant proposals to Emphasise, the first of which is refurbishing one of their old inefficient machines, which is used to clean and sanitise medical waste collection bins. And this will result in a much more efficient process, which will reduce water usage and energy usage, along with labour hours. And then the second one is a new machine, which is used to open the medical waste tubs and dispose of their contents. So this will be done without human interaction and will result in a much more efficient end result, which will result in less trips to waste disposal centres, which will reduce transportation CO2 emissions. And as you can see from the bottom right-hand corner, they're already looking, prior to the Emphasise project, to install solar panels on their roofs. So moving on to the R&D side. My computer. Okay. Moving on to the R&D, the innovation grants. Just a few case studies here, just to give you a rough idea of the kind of technologies that we're working with at the moment. So we kick things off with PowerQuad. So PowerQuad, they specialise in smart energy storage, and their R&D project with Emphasise is develop a new advanced charger for a range of battery chemistries, and they're looking to be able to receive both mains input and local renewable sources such as solar and other renewable energy sources that I mentioned previously, which will enable a greater level of efficiency, and it will also enable to bring the benefits of battery storage and renewable generation to every business. And they also deal with residential as well as business, and at the moment they're looking to increase their storage capacity from 600 watt peak to 1200 and 1800 watt respectively. So our next R&D grant comes from Solar Sidewalks. This is quite an interesting project. It's in partnership with the University of Portsmouth. And as you can see there on the right, that's a mock-up of what John is trying to achieve. As the name suggests, it's basically solar paving slabs. So the University of Portsmouth offered John a test site in Ravelin Park, in between the new sports centre and the University of Portsmouth. The paving that we see here on the left-hand side is all needs to be replaced. And they've given John the opportunity to lay up to 30 of these panels, which will feed back into the university library, which will bring those benefits back. Could bring the benefits back into the university. So he's currently seeking funding through Emphasise and other investment opportunities. So moving on to Airhead. Airhead are a new London startup based at the NatWest Accelerator. They're all former bankers who were struggling with their morning commute due to the rise in air pollutions in London, and they thought that they should do something about it. So they all gave up their jobs and have since been working to develop some high quality air pollution masks. So they're in partnership with Brunel University under their Impacting Business by Design program, and Brunel have actually helped them to develop a high quality prototype to protect against these rising air pollution levels in major cities. And obviously this will encourage people to get back on their bikes or walking or even using public transport to get to and from work, which in turn will hopefully help to resolve the root issue with pollution. So they're seeking funding to continue this development to run product tests and research into more sustainable materials and manufacturing processes. Because their prototype was developed by Brunel, they're now seeking other areas of academic expertise to run these tests. And then the final R&D grant application that we're looking at the moment is Baby Cup Limited. So Baby Cup Limited manufacture open weaning cups for ages from 4 months up to about 2.5, 3 years old. And these are designed to protect teeth and gums. As you can see there, the NHS is one of the major organisations that's picked up on these. So the design of the cup, like I said, it's an open cup, so there's no spouts. And it's designed around the idea to reduce consumerism. So like I said, the cup will last for the child's first three years of life, and is designed to not, like the current spouted cups that are impossible to clean, and as the child grows they become very chewed. So then cups are then replaced and obviously then just sent off to landfill or incineration. So these are designed to help eradicate the issues between the teeth and the gums, and also sending all this plastic to landfill. So they're seeking funding for an R&D project to allow the manufacturing process and the product design to allow for a fully recyclable and biodegradable finished product. You can also see they're also supplying other countries such as the Canadian government. Like I said at the beginning, there's other business support that we can offer through the programme. First of which is we can tap into the academic resources, like I said, from University of Portsmouth, University of Winchester. There's also other universities that we're in partnership with that we can reach out to. So these kind of resources that we have access to, for example, we have Blue Box Energy, and they're currently in talks with University of Portsmouth for a collaboration for an Innovate UK grant application and possibly a feasibility study afterwards. And then moving down to Smart Louvre. So within the grounds of University of Portsmouth, we have what's called Eco House, which is an old renovated caretaker's lodge, which the university has decked out with top of the range sensoring equipment, temperature devices, water control measures, so on and so forth. Smart Louvre actually manufacture solar heat screens, which fit on the outside of the windows, and they're looking for academic validation before they reach out to the larger organisms. So they've recently installed 12 of these screens onto some of the windows in the Eco House, and then student projects will be managed to test the difference in temperature between windows with them on and windows without them on. And then finally, we also run pitching events. So here you can see these were back in January. We had an SME pitching day. So companies were pitching their clean growth innovation projects to University of Portsmouth academics. So they were given about 45 minutes to pitch with a range of academics from across the university. And from this one pitching session, we have a confirmation of one Innovate UK collaboration bid, as well as 2 confirmed student projects to help develop prototypes or new designs. And then on the right-hand side, we also ran an SME pitching day to the award-winning energy services team at Portsmouth City Council. Again, they were given the same amount of time. They were given around 45 minutes to pitch their business, and then a question and answer panel afterwards. And again, from this, we've got confirmed that one contract was awarded from Portsmouth City Council, and another couple of the SMEs were given contacts to help develop their businesses. So then how do you get involved? It's a pretty simple process. If you haven't already, we would ask that you join up at Greentech South. And then once you're there, just utilise the Emphasise tab. We'll have a lot more information on the tab. And then in time, we're hoping for the application forms to also go live. And then just request an application form by sending over an email to emphasise@port.ac.uk. The original application form is pretty simple to fill in, shouldn't take too long. It's just confirming the business details, send that back over, and then a member of the team will get back in contact, and we can arrange site visits, we can arrange innovation audits, we can arrange the audits through GEP, repeat. Like I said, it's a pretty simple process. It's just, like I said, with the ERDF process, it can be quite paperwork intensive. And just warning through the academic side, it's a university, so it can be quite a slow process. But again, they're always there to try and help where they can. And one thing I forgot to mention at the beginning is you don't have to have an energy efficiency audit to be able to access the energy efficiency grants. A few applications we've had so far, they already know what they want to do. They've already had an audit in the past. They just want to utilise the funding that we've got available through Emphasize. So that's pretty much it. I'm quite happy to take any questions if there are any. I'll hand back over to Joe. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for the presentation. I think we're going to do questions after Richard's presentation, so you can put them together. So that's
cool.
Fine.
Thank you.
I'll just pass over to Richard now.
Another project called, sorry, I've only just been unmuted. So yes, thanks Matt for that presentation. In addition to Emphasize, we've also just about to launch Low Carbon Solent, which is more involved with the innovation, research and development side. Very, very similar to Emphasize in that there will be funding of up to £25,000 to help companies take a innovation closer to market. So that will be announced shortly, but in the meantime we do have the Emphasize, which is up and running, and we're actually taking applications, so please get them in. Joe, you have some questions for us, I think.
Yes. So the first one is, as a business not in Test Valley, can I get funding for a biomass boiler?
Okay, I couldn't quite hear that. Did you say, as a business not in Test Valley, can I get funding for a biomass boiler?
Yeah, that's correct.
That's one. Yes, the funding covers the whole of England. Obviously, because we're based on the south coast, we want to do as much of the work down here as we possibly can. But yeah, any business in England can qualify. But obviously, because Test Valley Borough Council is sponsoring us in this event, then we want to do most of the work down here. But no, anyone can apply.
Well, then the next one we've got is, I'm an inventor working from my home. Am I eligible for grants?
We work with lots of lone inventors actually, and we love them because they've always got great ideas. The thing that they don't normally have is funding to match fund the cost of a project. So we do work with them. They are eligible. They do have to set themselves up as a limited company or as a sole trader, or they have to have some form of legal legal entity. But yes, we work with lots of sole traders. We're working with one at the moment who's taking a new kind of tray that will go inside cavity walls to take away moisture and damp, etc., etc. Designed it in his shed in his garden, and now raised money from loans and also from us and Innovate UK. So yes, it is possible.
Then with Brexit, will the funds disappear?
Nope, but then you never know. The money's been with the UK government for some time now. If we don't spend it, it's going to go back to Brussels, and you can imagine how popular that will be. So no, it won't affect it.
Thank you. And then for the power quad, can they make better chargers for all devices?
Looking through my house and seeing that we must have about 4,500 leads and different charging points, I would love it if somebody came up with one universal charger that charges everything. But I'll mention it to PowerQuad. They're coming in for presentation on their research and development application very soon. So who knows? But don't hold your breath on that one.
Okay. We've also got a couple just coming in the chat. I'm based in Kent. Is there an equivalent for this area?
Based in where, Kent?
Yep.
There is a project over there called Low Case, and I would suggest that you ping Joe your email address, and we will put you in touch with the person leading on that. Off the top of my head, I can't remember who it is, but yes, there is definitely a similar thing over there.
Then we've got quite a long question. It might be worth me unmuting this person, so they could just ask it. It'd probably be easier for them to ask it. Hello, Beth.
Hi.
Hi, Beth. Do you want to just ask the question that you had for Richard or Matt?
Yeah, so I'm from Element Energy, which is the low carbon energy consultancy, and we're currently developing a tool for SMEs to use their smart meter data and their business characteristics to provide tailored feedback and advice on energy efficiency investments. And we've got various links to financing options on the website. We're currently trialling it with about 100 SMEs that we've just launched. Can we link to emphasise, and also what information would businesses require when they're coming to you with a grant application for you to look at, and would it be okay if that came through an online tool rather than a full energy audit from a site visit?
That's a really good question, and I'm really pleased that you're doing something on that, because technology also helps us to go travelling places, as we've seen recently. I would say off the top of my head, yes, we're open to any sort of improvements or moving things along like that. I think it's probably best if we take the conversation offline, because off the top of my head, I've no idea how we do this, but yeah, no, definitely, sounds of interest. If you let
Great.
Joe have your details, and we'll make contact. If it's not today, it'll be Monday.
Great, that's brilliant, thanks.
Yeah, I've left my email down below.
Any more questions, Joe?
No, we don't have any questions coming in at the moment. That's all of them answered, I think.
Okay, I think we are a few minutes over what we said we would be, which is not bad going, considering it's our first ever attempt. So from me, I'd just like to thank you all for joining us. We had a good number here, up to 30 businesses in the webinar this morning, which is fantastic. I'm sorry we haven't been able to see you and share a bacon sandwich. A big thank you to Matt and Pete for their presentations, which I thought were excellent. Those presentations will be online, I think, later today from Joe. The feedback form and the slides and the climate emergency statement from Test Valley Borough Council will be out very shortly. So I'd just like to thank Test Valley Borough Council for sponsoring this event, and for the next one, when there'll be an abundance of bacon sandwiches. Not sure why it's always bacon sandwiches, but thanks very much. Hopefully you can all go and get dressed in your business clothes now. I certainly will, and look forward to seeing you at the next SBN event. Thank you.